Hello, fellow fish nerds and students, both, or not both, but former, current, future, and students I have never and never will teach. This video is a lesson on the Virginia watershed, mostly the Chesapeake Bay watershed. This video is for mostly my students that were absent and students that need to review for a quiz. First thing we'll go over is the definitions. The definitions can all be found in the link down below to the Google document, so you can follow along if you want to print those up. That's all the quiz will be on. But anyways, the first definition is a watershed. A watershed is an area of land and the smaller bodies of water that drain into and flow into a larger body of water. The difference between a watershed and a tributary is that the watershed includes the area of land. That's why there are 6 states that are in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Those entire areas of land flow into the Chesapeake Bay, not just the rivers and creeks and bodies of water. So a tributary is smaller bodies of water that flow into a larger body of water. There are 3 major watersheds in Virginia. I'll draw a map for you here on the board. Really simple map of Virginia. The way I tell you to do it is you make a small triangle, big triangle, line across, and a vampire tooth. Okay, it looks backward on the phone, but anyways, here we go. That's a really bad drawing. Let me try this again. All right, small triangle, big, wider triangle, line across. There we go, it's showing up. And a vampire tooth right there is what it looks like. This is the eastern shore of the peninsula. Probably goes down a little bit further. Looks more like a stalactite, right? So, anyways, the 3 major watersheds in Virginia. The major one, the biggest one in Virginia, is the Chesapeake Bay Watershed, which is all of this area right here, Chesapeake Bay, not B-A-Y, not B-A-E, okay, Chesapeake Bay Watershed. The western, southwestern portion of Virginia is part of the Mississippi River / Gulf of Mexico. Whoop, not E-G-U-L-F of Mexico. Now you're probably wondering, well, how is it that we aren't even close to the Gulf of Mexico or the Mississippi River, yet part of Virginia flows into the Gulf of Mexico and the Mississippi River, which is probably closer to Susan for SLC Aquatics. But how does it happen? Well, because the water that falls on the western side of the Blue Ridge Mountains basically flows into rivers like the New River, which is actually one of the oldest rivers in the world, by the way. And then eventually flows, through Tennessee, and then it enters the Mississippi River that way. Then the last watershed that is the major watershed of Virginia is the North Carolina Sounds, NC Sounds. Now, North Carolina Sounds is so here's the Outer Banks right here. Looks, dotted and stuff because it's a chain of islands. It's an archipelago kind of, I guess you would say. Here's most of North Carolina. I really can't draw North Carolina at all, so I'm sorry, all you people in North Carolina. I've never tried drawing that. But the North Carolina Sounds is this area of water and wetlands right here is the North Carolina Sounds. So whenever you go to the Outer Banks, you climb up the sand dunes at Jockey Ridge across from Kitty Hawk Kites. That's not a advertisement, by the way, just where you go. And you looking at the ocean, right behind you, that body of water is in the North Carolina Sound. It's the Albemarle Sound. And some of that water actually flowed from Virginia, like the southeastern portion of Virginia. Okay, so these are the 3 major watersheds in Virginia. The 4, now focusing on the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So just this large portion that I just drew and erased right now. We'll do it again here. The Chesapeake Bay watershed in Virginia. Once again, we'll draw another really complicated map of Virginia. Small triangle, big triangle, line across, and vampire tooth next to the crab. Watch out, the crab's going to get you. So anyways, 4 major rivers in the Chesapeake Bay watershed in Virginia. The northernmost and the base of the border between Virginia and Maryland, and it's around D.C. Those of you that are, know D.C., that is the Potomac. Make sure that's in shot there. The next one, this is not drawn to scale. I feel like Doc Brown here. This is not the scale of distance between them, but it's just good enough for a simple map. Is the Rappahannock. Rappahannock. Now, speaking of the Rappahannock, it drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, we have a river house on the Tappahannock." No, you don't. "Oh, my grandmother lives in the Rappahannock." Not unless she's a mermaid, because the Rappahannock is the river, Tappahannock is the town. Those of you from Virginia will know that. It has been mentioned in a certain person's song too. But anyways, moving on. Tappahannock is the town, Rappahannock is the river. The next one down is the York River. The York River. The York River is another tributary of the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia. This is actually the watershed that I live in. So the next one down, the biggest one in Virginia, goes all the way across the entire state. It is the James River. The James River is the largest river watershed in Virginia. Goes across the entire state, starts in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and goes all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. 4 major rivers. Now, the way to remember this is please remember your jacket. Potomac, Rappahannock, York, and James. Crazy thing is that my cousin's house, that's literally, I could go to the end of my street and see her backyard. I know that sounds creepy, but she is in the James River watershed, this one right here. Whereas my house is in the York River watershed. Whereas when I used to live in my old house, which was 45 minutes away, I was still in the York River watershed. Now, what that is, what I'm talking about, is this little imaginary dotted line right here, which is called a divide. Between my house and my cousin's house, there's a road. That road is the imaginary boundary, imaginary border between the York River watershed and the James River watershed. That boundary is called a divide, D-I-V-I-D-E, just like it's spelled in math. It's pretty crazy. It's right out in front of my neighborhood. Just crazy to think that it's that close, yet it separates us by that much. It can also be mountains. Lastly, not lastly, but the next thing is an estuary. An estuary, the Chesapeake Bay is an example of an estuary. Obviously, this is the Chesapeake Bay right here. An estuary is a body of brackish water. It is where the ocean, and here's the Atlantic Ocean over here. ATL, not Atlantic, but Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean is over here. The Atlantic Ocean, where it meets the fresh water from the rivers, is an estuary. The North Carolina Sounds is an estuary. It has brackish water, and which brackish water, by the way, is a mixture of salt and fresh water. Fresh water is anywhere from 0 to 4 parts per thousand salt. Brackish water is between 4 and 34 parts per thousand salt, and salt water is anything above 34 parts per thousand salt. So the crazy thing is that although the rivers are flowing down into the ocean, which is always supplying with fresh water, that parts, and actually most of some of the rivers, are actually brackish. And how is that possible? Tides. High tide. When high tide comes in, it flushes salt water in. As the tide goes out and the rivers keep draining, or in this direction on the map, as the tide goes out and the rivers keep flowing, the salt levels drop, which makes it more fresh. All right, so lastly, the 6 states in the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. It was crazy to think, but there are 6 of them as far north as New York. So, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York. 6 states in the Chesapeake Bay Watershed, meaning even people as far north as I think the city that the Baseball Hall of Fame, Cooperstown, New York, I think that's even still in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. If they fertilize their lawns in the spring, the Chesapeake Bay is still affected by it. Don't fertilize your lawns in the spring. Biggest thing there. Even people in West Virginia, which are, over the mountains still, over in this area, are still affecting the quality of the Chesapeake Bay. Why do I care about the Chesapeake Bay? Not just because I teach it, but because I like to eat blue crabs. I like to eat these guys right here. Not that one. That one's plastic. But the real thing. They're tasty. Okay? So that's why I like to keep them safe. If you have any questions or anything, please comment below, or you can email me, those of you that know my email. through school. Or if you don't know me through school, you want to email me at MrScienceGeekChannel@gmail.com. I will answer them that way. Once again, the notes are provided in the description below. If you have any questions, put in the comments. If you want to use this for educational purposes, please feel free to use this video for educational purposes. That's obviously what I'm here for. If you have any questions, you're one of my current students, then please just ask me in class. If you need anything else described better, please just ask me in class, ask me in the hallway, whatever. Hope you all found this enjoyable. Please feel free to repeat it as needed, but I would think that's cruel and unusual punishment to hear me again and again. But I hope this was better than being in class, because I got through the entire class lesson in 10.5 minutes because there was no interruptions, no craziness. Now, I did skip over a few parts, which I'll talk about in the next video about the watershed, but stay tuned for that video. Stay tuned, stay fishy, people.